Hey guys, this is Amal from TechLeatherCraft. In this video, I want to talk about some great budget LED lighting options. I think these are a great option for around the house, for emergency preparedness, for an emergency kit, for example, or a go bag, or even carrying them in your car, in a trunk or a dash. And they came in super handy just having them around the house for just general household use at night or in the evening. I will also add that I do have a 2-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I had no issues handing them off to the kids to play with or to use in the evening, because the price point they're at, in the $10 to $15 range, that if they did end up damaging the flashlights or the lanterns or anything, that it wasn't a huge deal. And so I've had them for about 8 months, and durability wise, they've held up really well. And I will add to that at one point I found my 2-year-old using the flashlight head, the scoop, to kind of dig a hole in the gravel. So given that my kids were using them, they were thrown around, dropped on the ground several times. I feel like these are really well built for the price point they're at. Now I will go over some pros and some cons about them as I kind of go through the video. I will start with mentioning for summer, I was getting ready for a camping trip, and I went to go test out my super expensive LED lantern, and I found that it did not work, at least the way I had expected it to. So I actually went out to Amazon and found these Vont lanterns. Now I won't do a review specifically on these, but I will mention I really love the design of these because they fold down. You can easily stick them into a hiking pack, into a backpack, into a trunk, or cram it in with some camping gear or even an emergency kit. And because their size, they pack down into lots of different situations. Because of the opening and closing mechanism, they do a really good job at providing light when they're fully opened, and I feel like they provide just as much as any other lantern, if not more so, in fact. But because of the closing and opening mechanism, one of the really cool things about the design is you don't have to worry about it accidentally turning on. With my other lanterns I've had in the past, I've always worried about if I had them packed away in the trunk or if I have it packed in my backpack. I always worry about it accidentally getting pressed on, the power button turned on, and finding that the battery is drained. That is something you do not have to worry about with this style. I really appreciate that design mechanism. I actually ordered these from Amazon. About 2-3 weeks later, Vont did reach out to me and asked me if I wanted to review some of their other LED lighting. So quick disclosure though, Vont did not pay me for the review. They did not ask to review this video before I posted it. And so the opinions you're about to hear are my own. I will be going over pros and cons. I did test them out from June to about February when I'm making this video. So about 8 months. I didn't want to put a video out after reviewing it for a week or two. I feel like you can't really speak to the durability of an item unless you've used it for several months. Just keep in mind that these run anywhere from $10 to $15, somewhere in between. I will post all the Amazon links in the description. You can go check them out. The first thing I will talk about is the tactical flashlight. Now I will say that the design is very industrial, very chunky, rugged looking. Some people may like that, some people may not. One of the things I had difficulty with was keeping this in my pocket. It is a very thick flashlight. It does use 3 AAAs that are placed in a holder. And when you account for that and the barrel, it does make for a thick flashlight. I did carry it in my pocket every once in a while, but I found if I was carrying other items that I needed to get to, something like a wallet, it was kind of hard to reach in past the flashlight. I guess if you clipped it to a different pocket, you probably wouldn't have that issue. Something to keep in mind. I really hope that Vont releases something like a slimmer line, a little bit more sleeker flashlight, something like a AA. They might have one, I just haven't looked, but something like that takes a AA or 2 AAs and is maybe more slim line, more narrow. On the tail cap, it does have a nice rubber O-ring. I'm guessing it has a rubber O-ring by the flash head too. It does have a nice bright red tail switch. My 2-year-old actually had no issue figuring out how to turn it on and off. It can actually tail stand, so you can point up at the ceiling and kind of bounce light down from the ceiling if you need to use it in lantern mode. Now this is designed as a zooming flashlight. It has kind of a spotlight mode and then a floodlight, kind of a wider angle mode. Every flashlight I've seen that does this, when you zoom to the tightest setting, you can actually end up seeing the square LED. That does throw people off a little bit. You can actually zoom back out just a little bit, and that's not an issue. At this price point, that doesn't bother me. They do say it's 400 lumens. Now that I don't have a way of testing. I did compare it against my 200 and 300 lumen flashlights that I own. I felt like it was hard to tell depending on how you were zoomed, if you were out wide versus if you're using the spotlight mode. I would say they were equivalent to 300 lumen, potentially reaching further though because of the spotlight. Now I don't know if that's because the lumen was higher or because the zooming mechanism, it throws the beam a little further. It's hard to measure, and part of that also, it depends whether it's measured at the actual source of the light or if you're measuring further away at a distance. So the zoom mechanism is nicely dampened. This I feel like is really well tightly controlled. There is a little bit of play on it, but nothing that concerned me. I did give this to my kids to play with. They would drop them in the dirt while they were running around, leave them laying around overnight, out in the winter and summer nights. And so I have no issue with durability. And I will say at a couple points when my son didn't realize what the flashlight was meant to be used for, I did find him several times using it as a shovel to kind of dig dirt around in the ground. And so the dust and water resistance on this flashlight is really well done. If this had been one of my more expensive LED flashlights, I probably would have freaked out that my 2-year-old was doing that. The lens did get scratched a little bit, but it doesn't seem to have affected its performance. But it is something to point out that the durability of this was really tested thoroughly, especially by handing it off to kids. I feel like they really tested it out to its limits, and I'm really impressed with how well it's held up. The one negative I will say about this is that it does not have a memory mode. Currently it cycles high beam, medium beam, and then like a strobe function. So I would be using it on high, I would turn it off, put it down, come back to use it and turn it on, it has cycled to the medium mode. And then same thing if I was using it on low mode, if I turned it off, put it back down, and I turned it back on, it started back in the strobe mode. So it was not keeping track of what mode I had left it in. So I really hope in the next version that they find a way to have it store the memory, that it turns on in the mode that it was last used. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is this headlamp. This I probably used the most. The red LEDs has a solid or it has a blinking mode. And of course, you can use it to preserve night vision if you want. The light pattern that this throws, I feel like is really nice. It is a mid-level between a spotlight and a floodlight. So I feel like you can see, a wide angle around you. The beam throws far. And so I really enjoyed being able to get some nice distance with it. Vont does rate this at 160 lumens, which I feel is pretty close. I feel like it's right about there. They claim about 6 hours continuous use. And that also feels pretty true to me for what I use them for 5-10 minutes at a time. That feels about right. The design of the headband itself is super comfortable. I'm not sure what material they're using, but compared to some of the other headlamps I've used, this is a nice kind of soft feel to it. I had no problem just leaving this on my head for an hour or two. I was able to fit this onto my 9-year-old's head, and it has a little contour to it, so super comfortable fit. The unit does take 3 AAAs. It can be a little heavy, but I didn't notice that as an issue, neither did my kids actually. The mechanism has like a pivot to angle the light up and down, which I really liked. It was really easy to do. And then getting into the battery compartment, there is an O-ring seal around it as far as waterproofing goes. I did use this in the rain a lot when I was walking back and forth from my shop, and this was super handy in those situations. And it got wet, it got rained on. And of course, when it rains, this is on the top of your head. So, it handled the rain really well. I never had an issue with needing to dry it out or the light not working. The buttons on here are really easy to press also because the red and the white LED have their own switches. That's also really nice. You don't have to toggle between the red and white. You could if you wanted to. You could have both of them on. What's nice with this one is it does come on at the brightest setting always, and you can turn it down one level and then you can turn it down to strobe. And same thing with the red light. Overall, I feel like I got the most use out of this headlamp. Just doing household stuff. I was working on some stuff in my HVAC unit, and having that headlamp to kind of point and look at wires as I was working on stuff. And lots of everyday use. And at this price point, I would have no issue buying one for each one of my kids and for each family member, really. That's one of the things about these LED lights. You could stock up on them if you're going on a camping trip with family and friends. That you can ensure that each person had something like this. Having the blinking functionality on the red and the white, you could really use it for signaling also if you got lost in the woods. There was really no negatives. I guess if the only negative I would have is it does use the AAA batteries, 3 of them. Weight could be an issue if you're sensitive to that. To me, it was not an issue, but all in all, I think this is a solid product at this price point. It worked really well. I would have no problem using this hiking, camping, and emergency, which gets me to the last product that they sent me. These were the bike LEDs. Now these come as a set, a white and a red. So one's for the front, one's for the back. I do have a bike and I did put them on just to make sure that they work. What's cool about these is they have this thick rubber strap that you basically use to attach to anything. And so they work really well on your handlebars or even the fork of your bike, but I actually end up using them on my golf cart. I really like the mechanism they use. What it means is you don't have to just use it on a bike. You can actually wrap it around a square tube like my golf cart or an ATV handle or even an easy up tent And you can even have it at a campsite at night where the red light's flashing, and set up your campsite there so that if the kids are out and about playing, they can easily look towards the campsite and see where your tent is or where your campsite is. It has 4 modes. It has a bright, a mid-level, and then 2 different strobe settings. One is a slower strobe and then a faster strobe. Both the red and the white do that. The way that the strap works is that it's actually a clip also, because it has the ability to clip on or slide into a pocket. I actually clipped these onto the front and back of my backpack. So I clipped into like a back pocket or back loop on the back of my backpack. And then on the front, I clapped into like the shoulder straps. And so even if you were on foot, I feel like these would be handy to have if you were walking at night and you didn't want to get hit by a car. Even if you didn't have a bike, the functionality of these allows it to be carried in your backpack. And if you need to use it that way, you could. For signaling someone in an emergency, I could see them being really handy for that. So there's lots of uses for the bike lamps that I had not anticipated. And I probably plan on keeping these also in my emergency bag. Now, the second thing I will point out is I left these out on my golf cart basically the whole 8 months they've been sitting outside. I want to test out how well they seal. They've been sitting out in mist and fog and the humidity at night with the dew and all that stuff and frost. My concern was that the rubber flap on the side here, because these take lithium ion batteries, they're rechargeable through a micro USB port. What it allows them to do is really shrink the size of these down. These are basically fit in your palm of your hand. My concern with the charging port cover is that the rubber flap, at least on the units I received, they covered the port, but they were just kind of loose on top of it. It didn't friction fit into the port like some other weather sealing that I've seen. It is one thing that did concern me a little bit. Having said that, I didn't have any issue with it getting damaged. Everything still recharges perfectly fine. That would probably be my only con. So if you're interested in these, I will have Amazon links to all of these, the lantern, the flashlight, the headlamp, and the bike lights, links in the description. You can go check that out. Once again, I do recommend these. I did have a nice amount of time to test them out, and I want to say thanks to Vont for sending this out to me. Hopefully I can get more stuff in from them to review. I'm a huge fan of lighting and LED flashlights, and I know Vont makes a couple other LED products that I may check out. By the way, if you are interested, I will be posting a video coming up really soon on emergency preparedness and smartphones. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, be sure to subscribe to my channel. And of course, if you're interested in tech, leathercraft, EDC, and multi-tool stuff, I will be posting more videos soon. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.